Now, yesterday, the 21st of June 2024, would have been author Can Themba's 100th birthday. The famous South African writer and journalist was born on the 21st of June 1924 and died on the 8th of September 1967. To mark his centenary, biographer Dr Siphiwo Mahala screened a documentary titled Can Themba, the teacher in the newsroom. To help us remember the iconic writer, we are joined by Dr Siphiwo Mahala and Morongwa, who is Can Themba's daughter. A very good evening to you both, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Dr. Mahala, I'd like to start with you and all the work that you've been doing, compiling some of this work of the legendary Can Themba, and I think of some of your work through, like, you know, the intellectual Tsotsi and the others that we've mentioned in the intro. This week, as we celebrate the 100th birthday and of the anniversary of this legend, what are some of your favorite and fondest memories while working on documenting his history?
Well, thank you. Well, reflecting on Can Themba's life, you know, many of us were introduced to his work through short stories, particularly The Suit. And but my discovery, as I did interviews, I've done research dating as far back as 2013. So I've been working on Can Themba for the past 11 years. And what seemed to be most recurring was Can Themba's commitment to nurturing young minds. And the title of The Teacher in the Newsroom comes exactly from that. In fact, it was Ndade Jotlolwe, who is an icon on his own, who came up with that phrase when talking about how he got a breakthrough in journalism. He says it was Can Themba who was really patient with him as an aspiring journalist, who took his work, looked at it, and told him what he should improve. And you know, after that, he managed to publish in the Golden City Post, and that's how his journalism career began. And this is the recurring story throughout, whether you're talking to Mayet or you're talking to Bulelo Mzamanye or Professor Mushemgondo. And these are all Can Themba's products.
And his contribution, as we know, is quite tremendous indeed. And some of your works as well have been competitors. But I want to bring in Morongwa here as well, because this icon that we're celebrating, not only in South Africa, but on the continent and across the world, is the man that you just knew as Dad. Just talk to us about some of your fondest memories of your father, Can Themba.
Unfortunately, I don't have that many of them. I was 6 years old when he died. So a lot of what I know about him is what I hear from family and my mom. I do have very faint memory of who he was and the kind of things he liked doing around the house. I particularly have a memory of a dog we had called Fufu that he loved, and he bathed with it all the time. So a lot of what I know of Papa Ken is anecdotal, unfortunately.
And when you do hear those anecdotes, Morongwa, about your father, about Papa Ken, how does it make you feel?
Very proud. For a long time when I was younger, there was a lot of emphasis on the negative in his life. And as a child, that didn't make you feel very proud. But as I grew up and got to know his work, I realized that he actually was a great father and a great person. And it's the likes of Dr. Mahala who came out and looked at his life, the person who Can Themba really was. And that's been a source of pride for me and the family.
Yeah. And today, Dr. Mahala, I mean, when we think about just yesterday, the 21st being his birthday, the 100th birthday it would have been, and the 21st of June is now celebrated on the continent as Short Story Day. And you were just mentioning earlier in your answer that, you know, you also think back to the short stories that Can Themba wrote as well, and the contribution that he made. Now, when we think about the 21st of June now being known in the continent as Short Story Day in Africa, what do you make of the role of literature when we think about where it came from that era of the likes of Dr Themba to the era of yourselves and where we are today?
Well, I think particularly the generation of Can Themba was very instrumental in conscientizing many of us, helping us to be more discerning in the stories that we read. And looking at Can Themba specifically, you mentioned his social writing. One of his greatest, most well-known short stories is obviously The Suit.
Yeah.
And quite interestingly, while we were premiering the play, the documentary yesterday, The Suit was also on stage, performed by Silomaiga Ncube. This is especially important because he performed it here at the National Arts Festival, which is celebrating 50 years. But the play itself was first performed by Silomaiga Ncube in 1993, and then in 1994 he came to perform it here at the National Arts Festival. And so this also marked 30 years of that play. The significance of this is that even though Can Themba died almost 60 years ago, but his legacy continues. The work that he did at that time, the Suit was first published in 1963. But up to this day, it still fills up theaters as it has happened today. So that speaks to the legacy of the man and his creative ability.
And speaking of his legacy as well, we have to talk about, the role that he played as a writer in newspapers. Today, we're seeing the closure of the newspaper division of Media 24, excuse me, something many have called an end of an era with newspaper sales that are now dwindling. When you think of Dr. Can Themba's important writing during the apartheid period, more importantly, in newspapers, and now watching that sector dying a slow death, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's a sad indictment that newspapers are closing down, no doubt about it. But at the same time, we cannot stand in the way of technology. The world is evolving, so it's bound to happen. In fact, even Can Themba himself, what is little known about him is that he edited a magazine called Africa, described as Drum Magazine's younger sister. That magazine lasted for 2 years. It didn't sell very well. This is one of the things that the documentary talks about. So yeah, this is nothing new, but the challenge is upon us to ensure that we continue telling our stories, making use of whatever platforms are available to us.
And speaking of continuing to tell our stories, Morongwa, for you as a family, when it comes 21st of June every year, how do you celebrate this giant of a man, Babachau, your father?
We sing happy birthday to him every year. We chat about him, we sing about him, and we read his stories, and we share anecdotes and funny things that we did. I have a cousin who tells us he used to sit at the back of the church in St. Joseph's in Manzini eating a mango, just taking the mickey out of everything. So that's the kind of thing stories we enjoy sharing, and we laugh about it. And we continue to learn, and with every publication that's written, you learn a little bit more about him, and that's fun.
And also for you, Dr. Mahala, to be able to play that kind of a role in a family that needs that kind of information as well. I mean, to document his history as well, you consulted with an array of people from Bontate Don Matera, Nadine Gordimer, the late Ahmed Kathrada, to speak about the collections that they had, the engagements and memories that they had with Dr. Can Themba as well. What were some of the stories that they shared with you?
Yeah, I'm glad you're mentioning that. 80% of the people that I spoke to have since passed away, and that's the reason why I started the research in the first place. That I realized that the story of Can Themba won't be complete without capturing the stories from these people. And well, some of the fascinating stories. for me as a researcher was to learn that he actually wrote under different names. Because one of the questions that people often ask is that reading the suit, for instance, you can see the vast talent of this man. And, you know, what else did he write apart from the other stories? Because there's so much expectation that he seemed to, he had a far greater potential than the stories that we know. And I learned that he wrote under different names, including Morongwa, using Morongwa's first name and her mother's surname. And when I went to Swaziland, for instance, Pax Mangena also revealed that when Can Themba was burned, he used to publish stories through, using his name. So for me, this meant that I had to do more research and try to find these stories. And quite interestingly, almost every day I come across with something new by Can Themba. The documentary, for instance, includes a footage that has never been seen in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure Morongwa has never seen her father speaking in that manner. So there's always something new to discover about Can Themba.
That's phenomenal.
When he wrote under different names, it was usually when the security police were after him, or he just wanted to publish because he was unable to. He was banned from publishing, so he just took to writings under pseudonyms.
Yeah, and Morongwa, now that he actually was finding out that he was using also your name as one of his pseudonyms as well, did the writing bug perhaps hit you too?
I'm waiting for it to bite.
Hasn't bitten you yet.
I'm very keen on it. I've just always been afraid of being compared to him because I'll never measure up.
Yeah.
So that's why I actually haven't picked up a pen. But maybe now that I have a lot of time, I might just do that.
I would strongly encourage you to do that. I think it must be in the blood. It must be in the genes somehow. And just before I let you go as well, Dr. Mahala, when you're speaking of doing that extra research as well, finding extra pieces of writing where he had used pseudonyms, I believe that also entailed traveling across the continent, traveling across the country as well. Take us through that extensive period of research and trying to find more information.
Well, I traveled as far as London. I made 2 trips to Swaziland, because Swaziland is where he passed away. As I say, for me, looking at his whole legacy, I think what is most outstanding is his role as a teacher. And when I'm talking about a teacher, this is not confined to the classroom, because Can Themba left the classroom in 1953, but he continued mentoring young people in the newsroom. He continued visiting universities, the University of Pretoria and West University, as well as township schools like Orlando High. Professor Mushengondo, one of the people that I spoke to, actually got an opportunity to be taught poetry by Can Themba when he was visiting Orlando High. So he was that kind of a person, and we know about the House of Truth. I wrote a whole play about the House of Truth, which he established as a place for candid debate. So he was that kind of a person who encouraged intellectual engagement, who was intentional about nurturing young minds.
Well, thank you so much for the contributions that you've made to, documenting that history of the phenomenal and legend Can Themba's work. And to you, Morongwa Themba, thank you so much for sharing your experiences also and the stories that you shared with your family, also about your dog, Fufu, as well, that Can Themba adored so much. Thank you for joining us this evening.